Okay, so I guess I'll get started. We did a little bit of recapping for those of you who just joined us on the lower body stuff that we talked about last week, and maybe some little things that I didn't talk about that guys like Frank were just asking about. If anybody has any questions about the lower body, let's move on to our upper body discussion. So let's talk about is everyone familiar with the scap load? Because this is new and it's very strange to me. What the scap load is they're talking about pinching this back side back, right, to create some kind of load. Even the professional hitters that I've worked with, if I asked them what a load was, and they would give me these definitions like getting into a launch position, getting into a position of power. I said, well, those are great descriptors, but what is the function of the load, and what are we trying to accomplish with the load? What we're trying to do is create a slack removal. And in slack removal, what I mean by that is, I'll get up and demonstrate because we'll go back to our lower body stuff. When I get to my launch position, so I'm spread out and I'm in my launch position, if I were to not remove the slack, what the idea is, I want to have the system work in 3 sequences or 3 kinetic sequences. And that would be lower body, engaging or creating torque for the upper body or the torso, which then transfers into my arms third. And so if you see some pictures of good hitters, you know, Griffey Jr. and stuff like that, you'll see these pictures where their lower body's through, their back's still lagging, their chest is starting to turn. Is everybody familiar with that position? And all of this is happening in fractions of seconds, you know, less than 150 milliseconds. So if I were to not remove the slack in my upper body and I were to twitch here, you're going to see nothing is happening up here at all, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the slack by drawing this front shoulder back. And now as soon as I use my lower body, my elbow starts to get torqued along with this. So it goes boom, captures this. And then from that point, this is where we make the decision whether we're going to check swing or complete our swing. We're going to fire these enormous lats, the largest muscles in our upper body. I'm going to fire our core, boom, and release our bat. So it would go here, and then at this point here, it's pop, release through, okay? Where we run into a lot of problems with that, is everybody keeping up with that part of it? Any disagreement or agreement or anything like that going on? Okay.
I think there's questions. I have a question.
Awesome.
Like the current terminology today is like, it's a front side move. So if you look at it, if we were to watch your video, it could be like, oh, Ken's moving from his shoulder first. Are you really moving from your shoulder first? It just appears like that, but.
What do you mean by moving from my shoulder first?
Front side move, like as in this type of action.
Well,
I know it.
No, well, okay. If I were to not move my upper body like I was showing you, if I didn't engage, if I move my lower body first, then my lower body is creating 0 torque up here. So it's not going to be, I'm not going to be using that force that I built here. And then I end up with just an upper body swing. So I'm definitely not front side first when I'm doing that. It's just part of how things engage, these gears that are all attached to one another. One moves one, then what happens is in that swing, so we'll get back to a little pelvis talk, is my lower body will decelerate on its own here, which then allows the upper body to continue to follow through and transfer energy into my hands. It decelerates. If I stop using it, it decelerates naturally here. And then my swing, then all this energy transfers into my bat, and my swing comes through and it decelerates naturally here. Does all of that make sense? Okay, let's go over a few. I'm going to grab some pictures and I'm going to talk about that loading and sort of go over some of the things that happen that we want to work on preventing from happening. Lower body mechanics or upper body mechanics. Okay, so here's a hitter I did a series of posts on in Twitter, and we can go over talking about this. This is the same guy. I brought this up actually because it was a lower body discussion because he had suffered a lower back injury. But this illustrates some of the work we did in his upper body. In this picture here, and I'll give you a drawn picture, we'll notice that he has exactly the same arm shape, right? We have this V shape right here in his arms at his start position. Now, one of the things that happens with a hitter is, we'll also talk about this, I corrected the slot in his bat. So he had more of a drifting back kind of a position to his bat, which kind of points his knob more towards the outside box. And I slotted his bat, so now his bat knob is facing down so that when he goes forward, he's not making a short circle out to go forward, he's making a straight line forward to go forward. At his launch position, once he started his lower body, as you see, and we talked about that kinetic sequence working from ground to chest to arms, the shape of his arm hasn't changed at all. So it's load back, lower body starts to go, but the shape of his arm remains the same. When he was in single A, on the right is his big league swing, on the left is his single A swing. When he was single A, he got a long stretch out of his arms, and I believe Aaron is familiar with this, yes? We've talked a lot about this. He's got a good stretch going out of his arm, creating an incredible amount of length to his arm. And look at the different shapes in his arm at contact. Because of all that length, it brings his hands into the zone, and he starts to get his extension a little too soon here. Whereas out here, this was a home run, actually, and this was a fly ball. His arms are well out in front of him because we kept the shape so that his extension occurred here, as opposed to that length that we're going to get when we have that stretched out arm. And so one of the things that we're going to talk about here is how do we prevent that from happening? We'll show you a little video of some hitters that you're probably familiar with. And Giancarlo Stanton, you're going to see he does load, just like I tell you, through that front shoulder. He also has a pretty significant roll of his back shoulder. He does a lot of things that sort of create a lot of length and complication to his swing. But he's an elite guy. He's unbelievably huge and strong. But he does, and I'm going to show you some more videos of guys that they all have this front side slack removal going. So that's right. So that's Giancarlo with his extra pull to his back shoulder, and we'll also discuss that. Next, we'll show.
Ken, I'm going to jump in.
Sure.
Maybe other guys know that Giancarlo's been, or Mike Stanton, whatever you want to call him, has worked with Sosa Baseball, and Sosa has been with JD Martinez for the last few years, and that's out in Florida based. So I'm assuming well, JD Martinez was Wallenbrock. He was built by Wallenbrock.
Right.
So I'm assuming all that is translated over there, but he has made some different moves or attempted to make some different things. Right. It'd be interesting to see what happens going forward.
This was in his Miami Marlins days that I'm showing you this picture. So this was pretty long ago, probably before he got a whole lot of outside instruction. I know with the Yankees, he made some significant changes, and we can talk about that in a bit. Here we go. We're going to finish off his swing and go to a next one. This is Bonds. We're going to watch right there. Do we see the roll of that front shoulder? Okay. And so then as soon as that lower body goes, what's the front side doing? So you're talking about that front side move that I was illustrating. What's happening is our lower body torques our upper body, which then applies force to our hands, out to our bat, and through. And so that's the kinetic sequence of our swings. And so when we talk about a lot of these guys saying, oh, that's front side move and things like this, one of the problems that I see occurring a lot is that they fixate wholly on one aspect. They're not seeing the whole picture. They start focusing only on a shoulder and don't even bother looking at what the backside is doing at that same time. And so they get a little confused and they'll say, well, look, that's a frontside move. Well, there's Bonds, who everybody wants hitters to look like Bonds today. There you go. Front side slack removal. And we'll keep on through this. We'll finish his swing off. And here's Joe. This is Joe Mauer with that beautiful little wrap of his. And again, another guy who's doing the slack removal. And that'll be it for him. And so then we will go into some of my hitters doing this. Same thing, roll. Matt had a bit of a lift of his back elbow. Here we go. We'll go one more time with Matt. No scap loading. That was like a 500-foot home run right there, by the way. This is Jared Sandberg, who's with the Mariners. Probably of the hitters that I trained, my favorite swing. It had the least complication. There's Jared in that front side. You're seeing it from a different angle, rolling back. Here we are from the side angle, it rolling back. And then lastly, I have some shots here of Cirillo at batting practice pre-game. This was against the Reds. He has a bit of a drop. And the reason why I chose to add Cirillo is because while he's getting that same kind of front shoulder slack removal that I'm discussing with you, he's also got a bit of a drop to his hands. He likes to get a little lower in the zone with his swing. And so it's not a matter of this is my swing, it's the roll back along with this little drop down of his. So when we get on to removing that slack, what a lot of hitters don't realize is we're trying to hit a wall, right? Some hitters who are very timid, you will find, have a bit of a hitch, because what they'll do is they'll stride, they'll do what I call a soft load, which is, well, I'm not sure I want to complete this because the pitch hasn't told me to complete it. And then when they see the pitch is hittable, they add this little extra click right here, which that little click, if your swing is 150 milliseconds long, sometimes that little click can add 100 or 200 milliseconds to your swing. So that little move that you're looking at can absolutely destroy a hitter. I've given you guys some links to the calculators that I've built, and you can actually put in swing times with those. And what you can do is compare the swing time to the pitch time, and you would be able to say, this hitter, and I've done this with some college hitters when I was working with my tech and a college team in Washington. There were hitters that couldn't hit 90 if they wanted to because their swing took too long. They could generate the bat speed to do it, but the problem was the mechanics themselves took too much time. And so if you're talking about 400 milliseconds and your swing with your physiomotor delay, your reaction time, takes 430 milliseconds, you've now reached a point where you can't hit anything beyond that. And so that would be a guy who I'd say, okay, well, if I was facing 85, I guess I'd put this guy in the lineup. But if I'm facing 90, he doesn't stand a prayer. Everything's going to be foul, or he's going to be struggling to get his bat on the ball and taking bad swings. So that's one little issue that occurs that we want to make sure we're looking for when we're working with our hitters, or if you guys are hitters yourselves. The other one is we are attempting to hit this wall, this stop point where that is the slack removal. And sometimes a hitter feels this wall and they feel like, and especially if their cue is get your hands back, then they continue to move because they say, well, while I've hit a wall, I haven't stopped back. And now I get to this point and I go, now I'm back. And now I have this humongous long swing that bars out and does what we call a cast. It bars out here instead of its extension of the elbow out here. Another type was what I showed you with Giancarlo, which is Giancarlo hits the wall and then continues to float this. And when I have this floating back shoulder, the problem that the hitter has with this floating back shoulder is because it isn't actually hitting a wall, I may not consistently land at the same point every time. So my swing length and my swing time will constantly be in flux. It'll be changing all the time. If I were to hit the wall by floating that back shoulder, that wall would be there. This is where I'm at a torque point where I finally hit a wall. I'm looking at the umpire. There's no way I can hit from that position. And so we really want to make sure, you can add a little bit of length. Griffey Jr. did a little bit of length to this. Most of us, when we do this, we have a slight little turn, so we're going to get a little bit of an angle to our shoulders, but not a significant float back, which is what I do see with a lot of hitters. So we want to make sure we're just limiting that load position to here. One of the things that I see with a lot of hitters when I start talking about getting this rotating reach back shoulder, I showed Garrett, it was really simple, was it's almost impossible to straighten my arm if I'm trying to reach my hand over this shoulder here. So it's just this move here. And you'll notice again, my shape doesn't change. It's here to here, as opposed to here to here, like trying to move my hands. And what sometimes happens with the hitters when I say, okay, roll that shoulder back, is they go like this. They pick up their shoulder. And I'm saying, no, it's roll. I mean, we get this really nice little angle to our shoulder. Our front shoulders kind of gets that slight dip when we do this. Does everybody see that? So that's really what we're after, is we're looking for this dip. Part of what has created confusion over the scap load and hitting advice is it's interestingly cyclical, and it makes these sort of like, we return to something that we wanted to avoid for a long time. It doesn't make much sense to me. But for the longest time, let's get back to like the 50s where this was invented. We've all seen that little league hitter, maybe 10-year-old or something like that, big kid, can just hit tanks, right? And what that hitter did was they came into the batter's box with this up front shoulder, and they just looped and hit the ball. And by the time they get to 12 and you start seeing breaking pitches and higher velocities and things like that, those guys can't hit. And then their moms send them into me and they say, my son used to be the next Babe Ruth, and now he can't hit the side of a barn now that he's 12. And I say, well, yeah, it's a swing angle. And so when we had kind of more arcing pitches at 10 and things like that, didn't have so much break, and it was just a lot easier to hit. Then you had this, well, this has been forever because hitters think home run, hitters think hit fly ball. And so to fix those hitters, somebody, I don't know who, came up with, okay, front shoulders up, get that back elbow up. And they get the elbow up and look at how it corrected my shoulder angle. And so for a decade or so, you had these hitting coaches that were telling you, get that back shoulder up. There's the, get that back shoulder up. So sometime during probably the later 70s, somebody realized that this was not a good way. What we want to do, instead of, this front shoulder being up, we want to just adjust our angle. And so we'd say, okay, create some space between your chin and your front shoulder. And now I've corrected my angle without breaking something else, driving this guy up. One of the downsides to this high back elbow is, I don't care who you are, Albert Pujols, I don't care if it's Barry Bonds, which he's fairly soft in his back arm, but Mike Trout, all these guys with these high back elbows, when they go to swing, this elbow right here slots right there. We can't go forward if we keep this elbow up. And one guy who kept his elbow up the whole time, who was a prodigious fly ball hitter, hit a lot of home runs, but he hit a lot of fly balls, and he was a big man, was Ryan Howard. He was one of the few guys that actually kept this. And so he used this to drop his swing. So instead of slotting or tucking his elbow, he, boom, dropped this guy. And that was part of his swing pattern. Won't work, will not work for most hitters. And once they started not fearing Ryan Howard's power quite so much, they stopped walking him, and his batting average and on-base percentage took a pretty significant dive. Had some injuries involved in there as well, but main issue is that, he had a swing that wasn't multidimensional, wasn't really built to do anything but hit fly balls. So throughout the later 70s, early 80s to the 90s, if we saw this guy as hitting instructors, we get every hitter to just drop that arm, relax it, because it's just going to go forward anyways, okay? And we want to get this thing to tuck, and usually I see guys like this, Albert Pujols and guys like that, and the first thing that they do when they go to swing is they drop and relax that elbow anyways. So you're pretty much, you have a mechanic that isn't really doing anything for you. A really good reason why these hitters are high back elbowed is We talked about this last week. We make associations with strength and muscles in action. And so if my muscles are working, then I feel like I'm going to be strong, right? But hitting is a speed sport. And you don't see guys in track and field and other sprint activities in real tight positions, right? Pitchers who are going to work fast aren't in tight positions. They aren't here, right? But as hitters, because somebody's throwing a rock at us, we immediately make this intuitive association with let's get strong and let's get tight and let's fight. And that's not conducive to hitting and moving quickly. So we end up having to relax all of that tension anyways. One of the byproducts of all of that tension, all of that fight is this back elbow. Everything is real tight and they feel like, okay, now I'm ready to be strong and to fight. What they don't realize is they're going to relax it all anyways. And so it's really, again, a pretty superfluous, pointless kind of position to be in because I'm just going to get rid of it anyhow.
Just so everybody, kind of hears this as well as you do, I spent a lot of time with some hitters, with our hitters this week, talking about staying loose, talking about being fast with your hands, and using the analogy of grabbing that bottle. If I go to grab a bottle, I don't swing backwards. I go and grab the bottle. And it was the amount of light bulbs that you saw that went on were crazy, because every single one of them, I would tell them, like, okay, I would have my phone. Okay, here's my phone. Grab my phone. And every one of them just went. And then I'd ask them, well, why didn't you rock back? Why didn't you do this? Well, and every one of them said,
or this.
Right. Every one of them said, well, that would have taken too long. Oh, okay. Well, then why do you do that when you hit? And they just go,
It is a totally illogical movement pattern. And this is where I get into the arguments with so many of these guys who do all this swing analysis stuff. Well, a lot of all of that has to do with our fixation on controlling the outcome of the ball. And again, when we're talking about creating forget about controlling the outcome of the ball, we have to hit the ball first. And there are a multitude of ways to get the ball to do positive things, to go in up angles and things like that, without creating illogical paths to it that completely are counter to what our brains would produce for us, that pattern that our brain would produce for us. Which is why, for those of you who've seen the tweet that I often sort of rehash it, is that 2-year-old kid who wasn't taught to do anything, wasn't taught to walk, wasn't taught to swing, but his brain creates a perfect pattern to go to that ball. And there are some deviations that happen based on the intent. I want to smoke that ball, and sometimes you'll see some little changes in angles. But especially those of us who talk about, staying on top of the ball and things like that, what we're really after is trying to produce a line drive type of a swing that has as much adjustability as possible, can hit balls to as many fields as possible, and also is available. And if you listen to any interview with Albert Pujols, particularly in his first 10-year span where he was just absolutely a hitting god, he said, I'm a line drive hitter who hits home runs. I'm just after line drives. And when I have a obtuse collision, this would be a line drive, right? This is going to go straight back at you. And then if I caught it slightly off of center between those two center lines, it's going to work in an up pattern, right? And so I have a whole lot more adjustability to my swing by taking swings like that. And that's what we're after. But people get really confused and say, you're telling people to swing down on the ball and chop down on the ball. And I'm saying, well, no, that is not what we're talking about. And swings make an arc. They go down to my target, flat to my target, and back up again. Naturally, as it passes my hands, my barrel turns and starts to work up. That was a huge part of my Ted Williams discussion that I did a long time ago. It's available on my YouTube channel, where I talked for about 2 hours about all the misinterpretations of what, including some of the dialogue that Ted Williams uses, created a really misinterpreted version of what he's doing. He was not an up swinger. He was a flat swinger who caught the ball out front, a dead pull hitter on the up portion of his swing. So I'm going to return back to this back elbow thing. So it's really natural to see these guys, lots and lots of big leaguers with this high back elbow, totally unnecessary. You'd still get the same kind of swing. But what we'll eliminate by getting rid of this back elbow up thing is a lot of this sort of drag that we get back here. Because when we go to tuck this, oftentimes this happens. When you see it all in 150 milliseconds of fast motion, you have the teacher man guys who say, you're pronating your hand and snapping your barrel. That's not what's happening. It usually has to do with that hitter relaxing their back elbow and their barrel dropping behind them. There is absolutely no virtue whatsoever to having your barrel back behind you because the bulk of this bat weight sitting here wants to go here. So that requires me to pull harder and longer because I continuously have to guide the bat. Whereas if I initially were to have thrown it here, it still wants to fall this direction without much guidance. All I have to do is pop it here and it'll continue to work its way forward. And then the shape of my arms changes the path of the bat. And that means, if I were to relax my wrists even more, if I were a fine motor skilled guy like Garrett or like Ted Williams, then I might even have a lot more play in this kind of barrel. My barrel might be able to fall down here because my hands are so sort of artist-like. Not all of us have that type of wiring, and so not all of us are oriented towards those kind of muscles. So that comes into the problem that we have with replicating swings. And if we aren't wired the same, if we don't have the same strengths and weaknesses as another hitter, it's virtually impossible. We cannot do it. And a good example of this, and I think all of us who have played as youth ball players, is that we've all tried to hit like our favorite hitters. I tried to hit like Pete Rose when I was a kid, who was my favorite hitter. And I got into the batter's box and I was here. That lasted all of about 1 to 2 at-bats because it felt so awkward to me and so uncomfortable. I didn't like the position I was seeing from. I didn't like my collapsed core. I didn't like any of those things. And so I just gave up on it. And so then I just said, I'm going to play like Rose, but I'm just not going to hit like him. And so that's why I struggle with guys who use these pictures of hitters like Barry Bonds to say, look like Barry Bonds. And I'm saying, well, okay, first of all, you're not Barry Bonds. Barry Bonds being a steroids user, again, remember, we talk about when we have muscles, boy, do we want to use them. Well, Barry Bonds became very much an upper body hitter. And if you watch video of him hitting against Jenny Finch, a softball player, Team USA, and she's a pitcher. And she strikes out Pujols, and she strikes out all kinds of guys. And then Bonds comes up and hits her. But what Bonds does is this. He goes, eliminates his lower body. The video is on YouTube somewhere. I've seen it. And he goes, all he did was turn his bat. No extension, no nothing. Just got his bat into the zone. His eye-hand coordination, made sure he put his bat in the right place, and he just popped the ball. He didn't hit it. I mean, he made contact with it, but he wasn't trying to drive it. Whereas Pujols and anybody else who was facing Jenny Finch was in there trying to take swings like a normal swing and try to hit her. But Bonds just cheated it and made that little turn.
I believe he was the only guy she didn't strike out in all of that stuff.
Exactly. And so it was just a matter of cheating. What he does is, now, if you look at the history of home run distance, you will not find Barry Bonds in the top 25 anywhere. He's never hit a ball 500 feet. And the reason for that is he reduced the circumference of his swing, meaning the size of the arc that the swing makes. The larger the arc, like Giancarlo Stanton, very large arc because he has that long straight arm, the larger the arc, the more acceleration, the more velocity at contact the barrel has. The shorter the arc, the quicker the circle, the less velocity at the distal or far end of the bat, right? So we take this circle that's this big, that takes a little bit, fractions of a second, more time to complete, and we shrink it down to this size of a circle. So we think of, it's called conservation of momentum. We think of the ice skater. And when they're in a tight circle, they've brought their arms in and their feet are tight together, they spin in a very quick circle here. If they kicked out their leg, their leg would be moving even though it's the same speed, it appears to be moving slower than if they were spinning, but it's generating more force. It has greater acceleration because of the size of its arc. So Bonds, what he did was he cheated his swing because he now was super strong. And so not only through this short kind of a swing that he had, he could produce a lot of force that way. You take, performance enhancing drugs out of that equation and you shorten that swing. And now you've got guys who will like poke the ball over the infield. I've played with many of these guys that hit this way. What Teacher Man is teaching is nothing new. I've played with lots of guys that were guys that rotated their barrel into the zone. None of them really had any power. A lot of hitters will, as we've talked about before, once you've solved your timing confusions, then what we end up doing is we re-optimize our swing. We're trying to subconsciously perform at our maximum ability. And so what happens is some of the things you were taught now sort of go into the trash because you've reorganized those things so that they'll do more for you. You'll hit harder or anything like that. So most of us will have hitters that we train and then suddenly their mechanics begin to change a lot more. I had a discussion with someone who was at the meeting last week that emailed me today, and they were talking about T swings and things like that. And I said, I'm not against T's at all, but what I will tell you is that the swing on the tee is going to change a lot when you enter a moving pitch into the equation, because our body will respond totally differently once we have to solve a problem. When I'm hitting off a tee, there's no problem to solve. The ball's sitting there, and so we can test the integrity of their swings. Hopefully, we can generate a swing that has good enough timing to where it looks exactly like it did off the tee, but it rarely does. And because the ball is not in the same position it was in the tee, it might be up, it might be down, it might be farther away, it might be farther in, then you're going to see a lot of changes start to happen. And then you'll be able to look at video of Albert Pujols working on his swing thought, hitting off of a tee. And then in a game, you could put his game video next to it and say, he looks nothing like he does on the tee. And you'd say, well, yeah, that's exactly right. Because the conditions have now provided a constraint saying this is a problem that needs to be solved. So we tend to change a lot more. Okay, so we've talked about the back elbow issues and tucking those. We've talked about a bit about back barrel drops and things like that and how that's not actually going to get you speed. How I'll give you an example of that back barrel thing. A lot of things that Aaron Judge does are very, very like textbook right. He's gone through times where he had not great lower body mechanics because he was being taught something, but then returned back to having almost textbook lower body mechanics. One of the things that has really stuck with him with this quickness idea, and when we talk about quickening a swing, sometimes we're talking about fractions of seconds, and sometimes that's helpful and sometimes that's harmful. Sometimes we're talking about foregoing some bat speed and some adjustability, being able to use the field well for quickness. And we really want to have a happy medium with our swings. We don't want to just say we want absolutely the quickest possible circle. Then what we're doing is if I'm creating the quickest possible circle, then my barrel is entering into the zone here, and I end up not being able to pull. Anything that I do pull, I pull foul because now my barrel entered into the zone so soon over here that anything that's actually a pull ball is going to get hit foul. And so we tend to hit mostly balls to the opposite field. Aaron Judge, 2019, hit 6 balls in the air to left field. His first home run came in August. Most of his home runs that season were to the opposite field because he was turning his bat over so soon. And we're saying, well, yeah, he's letting the ball get deep on him. Well, that is kind of there's something confusing about that, because hitting the ball way deep into my swing is not a great idea. There are a lot of people who talk about, if I get my barrel in the zone quickly, and I know you guys have heard this, then I have more of a chance to hit the ball. Is that true or false? I know Garrett knows because we have a lot of discussions on this. The barrel, for some reason, and I don't understand this, for some reason, a lot of the hitting guys out there think that the barrel works like this. flat. It's not. It's turning and moving forward at the same time. So if this is where the ball and my sweet spot we're going to meet, my sweet spot's not going to meet it back here. I'm going to be back here. I'm going to hit it off my sweet spot. The farther back it goes here. Or I'd have to turn my swing over really early and have a totally different swing for different depths. And that's not something we want. When we talk about hitting from different depths, that's going to be our conversation next week. I know Garrett's excited about this. This is going to be our timing discussion, contact points and timing, which is absolutely the end all be all for me in hitting, because once you are no longer confounded by timing, again, I said your swing starts to actually optimize and change. And no matter how pretty your swing is, as far as your hitting coach is concerned, if you're not hitting the ball, it doesn't matter, right? You look great striking out. But being able to get your bat onto the ball is the most important thing. Getting your sweet spot onto the ball is really the most important part of that, because just getting my bat on the ball doesn't result in hits. Let's prevent some of the hazards, which is, we talked about why this guy goes, right? Because we're hitting a wall and saying, oh no, but keep on going. I've got more. The other one is this. And when we work with hitters, all of those hitters have been told, get your hands back. And so when you say get your hands back, then intuitively, what I'm doing is thinking, okay, here's the bat in my hands, move my hands, right? It isn't really your hands. Your hands are just really a part of this bat is what we want to think. And so when I practice this front side loading and maintaining the shape of my arm, I work with hitters to work on loading with their hands open. Now I'm hitting that wall without stretching my hands out. So one cue that we talked about was try to reach over the shoulder. The other cue is eliminate your hands entirely, and we're getting our bat back. When I swing forward, guess what? As I use my lower body that then engages my upper body, and then my upper body then engages my hands, my bat, I could throw this bat without ever closing my hands on it. I wouldn't have the sort of subtle control over the bat that I would like to, but I would be able to move my bat and literally throw it right at the pitcher without ever closing my hands. That's something you guys can try on your own if you want to. So the two things I recommend for eliminating the hands themselves is using that front shoulder to roll back, having the hands open while we do it. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? And so give those things a try on your own, grab a bat and just kind of start working in it. Randy is lifting that front shoulder like we talked about. Doing this. Remember, it's going to tuck and pull. So we want to actually roll that socket is what we're after. So I think that is a pretty good basis for my upper body discussion. Do we have anything we want to add, or any, like I said, most of these meetings, I want to start out with the subject and I'll go over the subject. It's difficult for me to kind of like guide it because I can talk about the million nuances of all that for hours. But I think I've given you, and if I talk for hours, then your heads are going to explode. So you have too much information. I've given you some really good basics of how to work on the loading and not changing the shape of our arms and things like that. Does anybody have a topic on hitting that we want to move on to now?
Well, I got a question about, you showed the picture of the guy that you worked with. I don't remember his name. You said
Jared Sandberg.
Huh?
Jared Sandberg.
I don't remember. It was the guy that you had the picture, side-by-side picture with AA and pro ball. Okay.
Jared Sandberg.
You had said that when you started working with him, that his bat was kind of flat here, and you slotted him to get him away from that so he didn't come out. Okay, can you explain how you could get from point A to he was here and you got him to here?
Right. So these are the nuances that save time, that don't take away from your power. I'm all about hitting the ball hard. And so what I don't want to do is create a swing that's really quick, but really lacks in power. I am all about every human, no matter what you weigh, no matter what your size is, you are hitting the ball as hard as you can possibly hit the ball. And so these are the little nuances. And when we take away this, if I have this flatter where my knob is starting to face over towards the opposite batter's box, this is a very little league swing right here. What it does is, remember, my objective is to go forward. And so if I'm going forward, then if this knob is facing there, it's always going to follow this path, go out, and then back in again, what we would call an out to in path. And so I can cut off some of the time delay, some of the bad angle, and some of the movement that isn't positive to going this way. So I can actually generate a little more bat speed by slotting the bat. And so what we do, it's really fun. When I was in college, I worked for a company that did sports photography. And so you'd have the little wallet-sized picture of Johnny and wearing his Tigers hat. And there he is. He's got the bat sitting on his shoulder like this. Look at the angle of my lower hand. It's twisted outward and slightly up. And so if you rested your wrists on your chest and set your bat on the shoulder instead of this, you have a perfect slot position you could lift up from. So now I have about a 45-degree angle to my barrel with my knob facing down. Okay, so that's one really easy way to do it, is have your hitters start with their wrists both very relaxed, sitting on their chest, and then lift up from that position you're ready to hit. Then I have a good slot position. I'm no longer in this flattened out position. The other thing is that we'll talk about how you actually affect that with your hitter. Tom Amansky, who was famous for making videos way back in the day with his AAU championship team from Florida, and all this stuff, he called it a radial deviation. And deviation means bend. Radial would mean towards the radius versus the ulna. So the radial deviation is just an upward bend. It's upward movement and a bend out towards that up. So if I had this kind of ulnar deviation, now I've got a sag and I've got my wrist rolling downward. Right? If I had a flat hand, I'll tend to have a lot more flatness to my bat. So now my bat's back to facing the other batter spots. It's boom. I think of it like revving a motorcycle for me. Now there's no tension in my hand doing this. And one of the things that when you first teach this to your hitters, what you want to make sure of is they're not trying to squeeze and hold this position, right? It's just shape it. But we want all of this. This wrist is the most important thing in moving this barrel. Is we want this wrist to stay totally relaxed. So we don't want to lock up this position right here and swing awkwardly with it. We want to take this wrist, set it, and then throw the bat, and then let the wrist do whatever it wants to. If that means that create more vertical bat angle because the ball's low, then go nuts. But we want to make sure that they're not trying to hold this position while they're swinging. We just don't want to start out with this kind of flatter kind of a position. So does that answer your question, Ron?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. Thank you.
Great. I would like to talk about something upper body oriented. And I think I spoke a lot about arms. No, I don't think. I know I talked a lot about arms. I didn't talk much about our posture. A very popular thing is the anterior pelvic tilt. And let's say I get a low pitch, then I want to bend. I want to get some tilt in my swing. Well, we're all familiar with what connection is, right? And connection is that when we are connected, and people confuse connection, when we are connected, then the kinetic transfer of energy comes from lower body to upper body to hands properly, because they're symbiotically linked. And what I mean by symbiotically linked, I'm not tensed. I'm not squeezing things to make sure that they stay connected, that's where the problem comes into it. But I'm simply allowing each segment to attach to itself, to one another symbiotically, and then we get our bat to pull through. So I keep telling people this because it makes me crazy that there is not a single pitch in this strike zone that I couldn't reach, right, with my barrel and my body maintaining the posture I started with. So if I got to the batter's box here, I've got my weight back, and so I'm going to have my butt counterbalancing my upper body with a slight tilt over here. As soon as I increase tilt here, I disconnect, because now my body is starting to rush this direction. And now when I rush this direction, the connection between my bat being pulled opposite equal starts to soften and slacken. So we're familiar with the opposite equal reaction that I'm talking about, which is, I think I demonstrated this last week. If I create equal force to this isn't way enough to where I get a little bit of a turn, but I create equal force resisting to this object turning, then I pull all the slack out of it. The moment I move with it, there's all kinds of slack. And so when I'm starting to dip, I'm starting to move with my bat, and I create slack between the system, and I am actually disconnected. So the same people who talk about the importance of connection are also actually disconnecting when they're tipping. So when I'm in a position where I can get great leverage on a swing and I have a low pitch, I can very easily hit this pitch while I'm in that same position I started in. There's no reason for me to do this. It is totally baffling to me that that's something that's being taught consistently. And I blame Mike Trout for it, and we'll get to that in a minute. But let's go back to some intuitive things that we do that we can make an association with that. So I'm in the infield and I'm playing third, and I'm in a position to where I can reach the third base so I can make a tag at the ground. I've got my hand here. What I would never, ever do if the ball was thrown down here is tilt my body to move my glove, because I disrupted my eye-hand coordination. My eyes said hands go here. This would go to what Ron was talking about earlier. My eyes said hands go here, so my hands are here because that's where the ball is. So it's here to here. I wouldn't go like this because I would have to compensate that calculation with my brain, and it just doesn't happen. And so I use my lever. I go like this to make my catches. I don't change my body position. We don't see the catcher doing a whole lot of this stuff when the ball is down and away. He's sitting in his crouch, and he's covering the strike zone, and he goes from here to here, here to here, here to here, without all this movement of his body. So why we do this as hitters, or why we teach this to hitters, baffles me. A down and in pitch, hit for a home run from exactly the same posture position he started from. This is something I train all of my hitters to do. And the reason why hitters have such a lot of bend, one of those reasons is because they have been taught swing level or get to the ball and all this. And so they try to bring their body so they can create this flatter swing to these lower pitches. They don't realize that it doesn't matter. Vertical bat angle is going to take care of that. We're still going to be able to hit the ball. We don't have to drop ourselves so that we're hitting the ball with our barrel like this. The barrel does not increase and decrease in size in terms of the size of my sweet spot, regardless of the angle that the bat arrives. It's still the same amount of space. It's just going to be more vertical bat angle on lower pitches, less vertical bat angle as we start to get higher in the zone. So that's one reason, is this sort of bad cue-based instruction or ideas of creating level swings and things like that.
Hey, Ken?
Yes.
So I think as far as connection goes, I know this is rampant in the softball community. A lot of it came from bat sensor, and what you're getting is a lot of people that are actually presetting and connection angle. When I mean connection angle, it's their bat angle perpendicular to their spine angle.
Right.
And they're presetting that angle and not a deviate. They're just using their bend to hit, to come through.
Right. Okay. So do I have your preset angle by slotting my wrist? Do I have that 90 to my back?
That's hard to see there, but
it's pretty darn close to what you're talking about. It actually did come from sensors. It came from golf, and the sensors are actually golf technology carried into baseball. And when professional baseball teams, because they actually beta tested this before it ever got to market, professional baseball teams said, well, what are all these metrics? And the golf companies, or the industries, the guys who came from the golf industry background, both Blast Motion and Diamond Kinetics, both of their founders, both of the guys who are behind these products, are steeped in a golf background. And so what they did was they provided a narrative to metrics that baseball never understood before, never thought about. Can you measure the vertical bat angle of something? Can you measure all these connection things? Well, part of the problem with connection is a lot of people pre-setting are putting themselves in a tight position to stay connected. They're tensing muscles.
Right.
If you do even the slightest bit of reading, first of all, for me, it's completely intuitive. And then I say, okay, now I take the intuitive and now I start looking at research and things like this. And there's a guy who many people will quote and talk about, and that is Bernstein. Okay, so they'll talk about Bernstein. But then when we talk about Bernstein, we talk about freezing couplings, tightening things. That is the most base of muscle movements. It's the basic learner position of learning how to hammer a nail. I'm going to use first only my shoulder, because the fewer things moving, the easier it is to control what's happening. Once we become a little we get into the kind of novice stage, then we're not only using our shoulder, but we're using our elbow. And so now we're hammering like this. Then I get to the expert stage, and I have 3 symbiotic couplings working together, and it's wrist, elbow, and shoulder. This is an expert move versus this or this, which is a non-expert or learner move. And so we take all of these ideas and say we're building elite hitters, and what we're actually doing is creating base movement learners. It's hilarious. All you have to do is do a little bit of research on it, because the first thing you see with all this tension is it's not intuitive. It's not how we walk. The difference between the toddler, why they call it toddlers, they wobble when they walk because they freeze things, because there's hundreds of muscles firing on and off to maintain balance, our core, our legs, all this stuff to maintain balance when we walk. But when we first learn how, we just can't start moving smoothly. We have these very stiff kind of movements that kind of wobble us. And eventually we start to flow together and we become expert walkers where everything is smooth and flowing. Abe Lincoln at Disneyland looks like Abe Lincoln, moves nothing like a human being. So yeah, that's where that connection came from, was this story that was passed on, because baseball's going, well, what's with these metrics? We love science. What's with these metrics? What do they mean? And they tell them what they mean. Blast motion and diamond kinetics created a narrative and then fed that to them. And now they're fixated on vertical bat angle, which constantly changes based on the height of the pitch. We never repeat anything twice as a human being. None of these things really they're very anecdotal, because you can't control the stuff. I think I'll swing with the 16-degree angle. You can't control any of that stuff. So it's very, very bizarre. So anyway, I think I've taxed that particular subject to death. Yes, Frank?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, well, does anybody remember where I was? Oh, I was talking about anterior tilting and finding it completely ridiculous and unnecessary, because we want to use our levers to move rather than changing our physical proximity to the strike zone, adjusting our eye angles and things like this. Mike Trout, being Mike Trout, who probably as a youth just hit and was talented, and I doubt he had an incredible amount of instruction, probably from a very early age tied his eye-hand coordination to an anterior tilt. And what I mean by that is, remember how I said our brain would have to recalculate when we were reaching for an object, but then changed our position to it? I think Mike Trout, for such a long time, I know that as I've gotten older, I was thin and in great shape, and now I'm not so thin and not so great shape, being 58 years old or 57 on the cusp of. And so oftentimes when I get into the batter's box, I'm soft because I haven't supported in my core. And I have to remind myself to support my core so that I get more upright and less here. And when you're talking about youth baseball players, one of the big issues that you have with them, and I have to remind them, is baseball and softball, by the way. I have to remind them, support in your core. You have to maintain support in your core so your body stays stable and doesn't tip along when you start to make moves. And I think personally, it's just speculating, but I think that Mike Trout probably connected his eye-hand coordination to that type of tilt his whole life. And so he's an absolute expert at making that recalculation. But for the rest of us, I would recommend we don't change our bend. Any questions or any suggestions on where to move from here? Well, I don't know. I think I've given you a ton to think about on this, and I don't like to overwhelm anybody with information, which is why I'm thinking I've probably given you enough on the whole upper body thing, unless we have questions or unless we want to move to something else.
Can I have a quick one? This is Gabe.
Sure, Gabe.
When you're back on the arms, when you're thinking about where to place them, and you described how you can just kind of lift up from standing and, for the photo, what about when you see guys with the arms kind of drifting away from the body, like in their stance? I'm thinking of somebody like Keith Hernandez, right? Like where he kept his hands like way out over home plate almost in his setup, and then brought him in. Yeah.
Great question. I don't have a terrific memory of what Keith Hernandez did, but I will give you a demonstration of what Sammy Sosa did. And that was Sammy Sosa set up. So here's my plate. I don't know if you guys can see that here. Here's my plate. Sammy Sosa set up here. And the reason why Sammy Sosa set up here, and a great question about where we start with our hands, is because Sammy Sosa had an instep to a long stride move. And so what we want to do is position our hands so that every move that we make, and Mason and I were working on this, talking about this a lot, is that our moves want to work in sync with one another, the same length and the same speed, so that they start and complete at the same time. And so if I had a particularly long forward stride move, I'd have to have a load move with my upper body that was equal in length. So if I have a 12-inch, 14-inch stride, I need a 12-inch, 14-inch load maneuver so that one isn't completed before the other. As soon as my foot's on the ground, I'm ready to go. So I don't want my hands to have that extra hitch move. Or a reverse of that would be, I don't want my hands to be a short move back and a long stride forward, because what happens then, and some of you may have experienced this before with your hitters, is if their hands get completed first and they stride, when they land, their whole body gets dragged forward. They don't separate like this. They actually get pulled forward into their swings. And then you end up, Randy's nodding his head because he knows this. And if you're a pitcher, throw those fools off speed outside and you'll eat them up. Yeah, you'll end up with this front foot hitter and things like that. They really have to be in super sync with the pitch that they were guessing, or they're doomed. They're out in front of it. And so you really want to make sure those are separated properly, so that when we do stride and load, everything works sort of like a scissors, and it sets here perfectly, as opposed to boom and getting dragged in, or boom and then hitching back. So does that make sense for everybody? That would be why Keith Hernandez may have had his hands out over the plate, because he probably had a longer stride maneuver.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. It was a great question. So I think that's pretty helpful for everybody. Garrett, you love to help me out with questions for the room.
I was thinking back to Frank, because Frank's in the softball world, and he was talking about connection. And like, how many in the softball world, how many are geared to trying to, it's hard to say this or make it, they try to manipulate the shoulders so the bat whips this way. If that even makes sense. Do you know,
I know what you're talking about,
Frank?
You see a lot of these guys practicing this. That stop, that unnatural deceleration that they're actually saying, we're teaching him to decelerate. And I go, I don't get it. But yeah, that's a good question for Ron.
Or it was Frank. It was Frank.
Frank, yes.
Yeah, no, it's happened in the baseball world too. I mean, we as a coaching staff freaking, we have a shortstop that's freaking highly athletic kid. And he constantly has got that little, that decelerate. I mean, hell, I freaking came, I'm in Florida now. I moved from California. Everybody can guess that. I was about 2 hours from Penn. But I had a kid that was like, I mean, you'd almost give this kid a green light no matter what, because if he hit a single, you were doomed because he just wasn't a bad body, not a great runner. And he had that deceleration, and he was one hell of a slap singles guy, you know, and so it's you see it everywhere now.
It's so odd to me because we, like I was talking about, each segment naturally decelerates. It's like we suddenly fixate on something that we thought we could control, and we said, okay, now let's decelerate. I don't understand why. What is wrong with following through? I think a lot of this comes from the issue of hitters, and I think any of you have probably experienced this, when hitters pull their chests. And so now you've got the head looking over at the dugout and swinging and missing. And the cue that I hear from pitcher or from coaches is, don't pull your head. Well, I'm pretty sure the hitter knew they pulled their head. So the answer isn't in not doing it, it's how to prevent it. And so the hitter might, end up stiffening and trying to force their head back into the zone. If we haven't used the system properly by twitching and letting go, then if we maintain what we feel is strength and power, if we maintain the use of muscles, everything once again becomes what we were talking about a second ago with Bernstein, frozen together. And so now my pelvis, my chest, and my head all become a single unit here. I feel like I'm super strong, but everything turns together instead of decelerating naturally, and carrying through, right? A lot of people are teaching this linking here, and then to muscle through here, which is just slowing your back down, to now do this to prevent your chest from continuing out. So again, this is another example of break something to fix something. And I think it's not a great idea. I just don't get it. What is another issue with uppers that? Okay, I have a question just for the room. Does anybody feel that there's a difference between a fast pitch softball swing and a baseball swing?
No, not. I mean, there are differences. More to do with vision, I think.
Okay, but swing.
But as far as swing, no. I mean,
absolutely.
I've been with a very high level Lindsay Hare Gorman. Frank, have you ever heard that name?
Mm-hmm. No.
Okay, so she either was one away from the NCAA home run record, and she's a tall woman, and she's very physical. But she said the difference is, she talked about a very linear hand pass, Ken, like up to down, like down to the right knee. But the difference is in the rise ball. And she would say that, hopefully my camera will do me justice here. She said, like in the baseball swing, we'll see elbows drop. And she says this elbow has to stay up longer so you can adjust, because you just don't have time. We're so limited on time. So if this one can stay up, and then we have the bat weighs different.
Okay, what if I didn't start with my elbow up to start with? Could I make that higher swing on the?
I'm assuming it would be the same.
I'll answer this from experience. I played open level softball, the highest level of ASA open level softball for, 10 years after I stopped playing baseball. And I returned back to baseball when I was about 38. But so I'm going to go back to, it was sort of I wanted to get everybody's opinion. The swing is exactly the same because the physics are exactly the same. The ball is released. The difference is absolutely because of the rise ball, it's imperative to not have a loopy swing. You really have to be on top of it and have an adjustable swing that enables your swing to get flat. I'm not talking about swinging down on balls. That's not anything that I or most anybody teaches. It's swinging down to get to this arc position right here. And the two are exactly the same because the physics is exactly the same. It's just that it's more imperative to not have a loopy swing when you're dealing with people who throw rise balls. Otherwise.
And most rise balls are balls anyway, 90% of them. I mean,
yes, they are.
I will tell anybody, they ask how to hit the rise ball, and I just say, don't miss the fastball. I mean.
Right. But here's the crazy thing. And I don't know about, I think in like NCAA and maybe with female, it's a little different, but we were hitting white balls with white laces.
Yeah. Well, that's where I was getting with the vision thing. The contrast between red laces and a yellow ball isn't as much as red laces with a white ball.
Right.
So there's a slight, you have to be quicker. It's harder to recognize spin in the fast pitch world than it is baseball.
We're going to talk all about that next week.
Okay.
Because Garrett and I were talking about this. Personally, I think in retrospect, we kind of replay the whole event all over again in our heads and say, oh yeah, I saw spin. In the moment, I highly doubt we're seeing any spin. Highly doubt. Some of the greatest hitters of all time, one of those being Tony Gwynn. And there's a great conversation that I have of Tony Gwynn talking with John Smoltz. He was facing Smoltz and he thought something was off and a little bit weird. And he went back to the video room and he watched it and he said, oh my God, he threw me a knuckleball. And then he goes to Smoltz and says, did you throw me a knuckleball? And Smoltz laughs and says, yeah. Tony Gwynn didn't see it spin. And he said, I never saw spin. What we're reading is the change in depth. Off-speed pitches just aren't dilating, getting close to us at the same rate as fastballs. And so like we have, I think seeing spin is really lore. I think we see shadows just fine. And that's really what I think we're picking up. But I think it's lore in the same sense that there are a million hitters out there that are going to tell you, I saw the bat hit my ball when it is virtually impossible. What our brain did was produced a prediction of what would happen and sewed it all together seamlessly so that we think we saw the bat hit the ball, but we never did. We can't. And there are guys who will swear up and down and probably fight you over it. And I think the same thing is with spin. I really do. And that's why playing fast pitch with white balls, with white laces, it was more shadowing and things like that. It was more, I had to pay a lot more attention to what the hand position was with especially rise ball guys. I'd catch a few people who throw forward wristed. And as soon as you saw that, you just go, poof, spit on it. It's not going to be a fastball. And then then the guy was done for if anybody picked up his tell. But, other than that, I would say swinging a softball. And I trained a lot of softball players. I had a girl who was at Stanford on a full ride who I trained her like any other hitter I ever trained. Right. And the same always went with softball players was I'm teaching you the same swing, the same kinematic sequencing, the same everything, same angles. I'm not big on loop guys. If I had hitters that wanted to, I guess I'd say, okay, go nuts. But it's going to suffer. No, we're all silent. Okay, well, I think I've given you a ton to think about, lots of stuff, and that's why I keep asking, do we have any questions so that I can maybe word it differently for you, whatever. But I think we all got it. I think you're going to be overwhelmed with any more information. So I think we've got a lot going here. And,
I've got a question. I have a kid that does something incredibly strange to me. Uh-huh. Okay, so when he goes to hit, so background on the kid, I want to say it's his 9th grade year. He got hit in the eye, got hit in the eye socket with a pitch. It actually broke his nose. It didn't break the socket, it broke the nose. And I was told that he didn't do this before, but now he does it. And when he goes to hit, he loads and his hands will go so he'll load and then he'll do this with his hands. So his hands will slightly come forward. Huh. And then so you can guess how awkward it is. But right. This kid is, he's a potential, I don't think he's a potential MLB draft guy out of high school. He is out of college. I know that. And there's people that have also talked to him about pitching as well as hitting. He's got a ton of power, but he literally will come here and then his hands will click forward and then he'll hit from that position. Okay. And I'm lost. I've never seen it before. And I've talked to some pro guys and they're like, we've tried, there's a couple pro guys around our area. They have no idea. They've tried to help the kid and
interesting.
Nobody can seem to unlock it.
Okay, so I will talk on that subject. That's a fun one because the first question I was going to ask is he hitting the ball? And you're saying, obviously, if he's like potentially a draft pick guy, then yeah. So I wouldn't say that his eye issue had anything to do with it. And any kind of anomalous mechanic that I see show up that you can't untrain a hitter from usually has to do with vision, like head tilts and things like that will have to do with vision, because what a lot of head tilt guys are doing is we're all kind of Picassos and we are not symmetrical. And so some people have a slightly higher eye on one side than the other. We all have, one ear that's slightly higher, things like that. Sometimes it's noticeable, sometimes it isn't. And so if they have a bit of a tilt to their eyes, when they're looking at the ball from an upright position, it becomes blurry. And they have intuitively, not intentionally, discovered that when they tilt, they remove the blur, and now their eyes are looking at the ball more symmetrically without all that blur. And so I've had guys that coaches were saying, well, they've got to get that tilt out of his head. And I said, I sent him to a doctor. You can't. You can get a prism glasses that will fix that, but that is actually a matter of the fact that he is not perfectly symmetrical. So I wouldn't say if he's hitting the ball, it's not a vision issue. It sounds like a very quirky thing. Now, here's the other thing. Does he have power for hitting from that position?
I mean, when he squares the ball up, yes, like tremendous amount of power.
Okay.
But it's either, I mean, he will either hit a ball that make your jaw drop, or he'll hit something that any of our 3-year-old kids could at times figure out how to hit. It's a really weird, and right. It's not like it'll be just jaw dropping for 2-3 games in a row. I mean, it could be jaw dropping that first at bat, and then the rest of the game you're just scratching your head like, how's this kid even in a lineup?
Okay, anybody? So I have an idea on this. When I was in Washington, I had a great network. I know exactly what my limitations are. If you had mechanics that told me that you had tension in your hip flexor in the front side because your foot constantly opened every time you landed with an open foot, then I'd send you to somebody. I'd say, I know a guy who could teach you how to stretch. I don't know that stuff. I stay in my lane. I know hitting mechanics. I know when you have a deficiency, I know how to identify what part of the body is deficient and what needs to be fixed, but I don't know how to fix it, and I wouldn't presume to. So I remain in my lane in that respect. And so that network that I built included the Mariners eye doctor. And anytime I had an issue, and I trained with him, I traded lessons with his son, who was a prospect at the time. I traded lessons with him for him teaching me about vision and answering all the questions that I had. So that was a really great relationship. And what I would do is I would send my players that had struggles with vision to him. Or if I saw a mechanic that was really odd and I could see how I couldn't fix it, then I knew it was tied to vision, I'd send it to him, that guy to him. And then he would go through the process of doing an examination that wasn't limited to whether you're 20/20. But some of us our eyes will have this battle. He told me a story about a catcher with the Mariners who was having a lot of stonehand problems. And what happened with this guy is as the ball approached him, then one eye would shift to the other eye for dominance. And then as it got closer, his eyes would once again shift back to dominance. And so any of us who look at an object and wink one eye and then open the other, your finger looks like it's moving back and forth when it's actually stationary. Well, that's what's happening with those guys. So I would suggest if you had some issues with a guy particularly somebody who got poked in the eye with a ball or poked in the nose that may have caused some vision issues for him, that created a mechanic that you can't get rid of, there's a possibility that he actually has intuitively connected the fact that he's not picking the ball up early enough. And because he's picking up later, he has to create a shorter mechanical movement in order to get from point A to point B quicker. That's what I would guess was an issue, because it doesn't make sense. I don't know what, Ty Cobb did this to cheat against Walter Johnson. He said, I actually started with my bat in the zone. Ty Cobb was just looking to poke the ball. So that wasn't an issue for him. He just wanted to pop it over the infield. Your guy, that's a very, very interesting problem. And I would probably suggest sending him to an eye doctor and saying, I need his depth perception. I need his eye dominance as objects move towards him kind of tested. And that might be a solution. Now, if he's hitting the ball consistently, then, we're looking for a solution to something that isn't really a problem. If he is a guy who runs into the ball once in a while, and when he does run into it, he smokes it, but most of the time he doesn't, then I would say, okay, then he's really good at syncing up. But without a lot of information, I really couldn't make a serious guess. Right. Yeah. But yeah, if he has been hit in the face, that's one warning sign that says there may be something going on.
Right. And that was primarily the last year he played baseball because he got hit in the face. Then COVID obviously hit. And then he ended up getting his knee scoped. So it was like, I got hit in the face. And then the next 2 years of my life playing baseball got interrupted.
Right.
And now. So.
Yeah. Do you have any video of that guy? I'd love to see it.
I definitely get it for you.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. DM that to me. I'd love to see it.
Okay. Yeah. We play tomorrow, so I'll easily be able to get some for you.
Okay. Yeah. Then I'll have at least a little bit better of an idea. Right now, I'm just making pictures of my head.
Oh yeah. No, I get it. Yeah.
But yeah, that would be really cool.
Okay.
Thank you. Great. Anybody else have anything you want to contribute?
Does anybody talk about the barrel turn? Like Frank, Aaron, Ron, do you guys talk about the barrel turn? It's just something that's so prevalent now again nowadays. I don't. It's gotten like, I try to tell the kids, like, you're trying to turn it's almost like deceleration. They're trying to create a perfect path. And I'm like, you're trying to turn the barrel, and you turn the barrel in the exact same spot on every practice swing that you take. Oh, and then guess what? You don't know where the flipping ball is going to be. And so if it's outside and you've patterned this practice barrel swing to this specific spot, you're going to get beat every time. And I try to tell the kids just, and I was saying this, and I think Ken's helped me like kind of phrase it smoother and better. But I've tried to tell the kids, like, get your hands going, and your freaking mind is like the smartest computer in the world. It's going to freaking figure out where to turn the barrel for you. But if you're trying to manipulate the barrel, you're screwed. Okay,
now I got to jump in. Okay, so here's the funny thing. You're absolutely right in the simplification of allow my brain to create a pattern to get my hands to the ball, right?
Right.
If I were to throw this bat, because it has more weight here than here, if I were to throw this bat like an arrow, would it travel like an arrow?
No.
It's going to helicopter.
Right.
Do we need to turn our barrel over? It's going to turn itself. Anytime I have to turn this barrel over, it's because I'm adjusting because I got beaten. I'm too early or I'm too late, and I turn it over. Otherwise, if I throw my hands forward, which is the linear aspect of my swing, my hands going forward, this barrel is going to travel along an arc all by itself. All I'm doing is guiding it softly with my hands to prevent it from, as soon as it starts to turn this way, going there, and to prevent it from going out there, and hitting the pitcher, flying out of my hands because I'm not guiding it. But other than that, all I'm doing is guiding this thing like train track, which has no engine. All the train track does is guide the engine. And so we'll just imagine that our arms are just guiding this barrel that is now turning all by itself because of the way the weight is distributed and the way we've tugged this handle to get it started. So we don't actually turn our barrel over unless we have a problem. Otherwise, it turns over for itself. It's the same as, do I turn over the whip when I throw it? I throw the whip and it turns itself over and it snaps. And it snaps because I opposite equal reaction it. But other than that, I don't have to concern myself with turning the barrel over unless there was some kind of error in my timing. Does that make sense, Garrett?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to, I don't know how many other people Anybody know Paul Nyman back in the day?
Yeah.
Anybody know that name?
Yeah.
The Steve English Bay.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So I went and hit with English at one time in my life.
Set Pro.
Yep. Yeah. All where it came from. And they would always talk about how the scapulas would reshape, and that would create the whip where my barrel would come around. All these guys, the other guys know exactly what I'm talking about.
Here's the thing, and I caution everybody about this. I have a guy who's a pretty decent hitting coach who also is a pretty decent pitching coach. And here's the thing. I spent 25 years of my life, plus my playing portion and all the thinking I did during then, but I spent 25 years of my life learning about hitting, asking thousands and thousands of questions, reading studies, really understanding how our body works, learning the kinetic sequence, the whole thing. And in order for me to be able to answer almost any question you have on this, I had to dedicate my life to one subject. And anybody who is a master of two subjects, I say you are one incredibly exceptional human being. Because I think I'm a pretty bright guy, and I don't have the capacity to know as much about pitching as I do about hitting. I was a really terrific scout of hitters and fielders, and I was a complete absentee as a scout of pitchers. I told Tampa, I don't look at pitchers because I don't know pitching. I wouldn't presume to, so I would never give you an accurate report. What I do know is I will bet my life on my assessment of my hitters. That part I know. And so I'm always cautious of guys who are these like pitching experts, hitting experts. And again, I go back to the real simple, intuitive stuff. When somebody tells me my scaps are the things that are changing my barrel, I say, throw the bat and tell me what it does, because it'll turn. And so I just don't get that. That is some strange stuff. And I tried to warn this guy that I know. I said, you should focus on one or the other. You focus on both, and you're going to be fairly mediocre at both, in my opinion. You're going to be super strong in one, and you'll perceive that you're really excellent at the other. But I don't know people who can do that. I don't know too many humans that have that kind of capacity. That's just my opinion.
What's the phrase? Something master of none.
Oh yeah. Jack of all trades, master of none.
Jack of all trades, master of none.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And we really should know what our limitations are. That's the thing is I knew. I wasn't afraid to tell you. I'm not afraid to tell anybody of what I don't know. And there's a mountain of things that I don't know. And pitching in particular, I know everything I need to know about once the ball's flying at a hitter. I know absolutely nothing about how the pitcher got there. I don't care. Randy is smiling because
that's what I came to you the first time with, is because I'm all on one side of the pitching realm, but hitting I have a minute understanding. So
right, there are a few similarities. Like I said, relaxed to move ballistically. Absolutely. Pitchers know that. And that's the same thing with hitters. As far as the rest of the mechanics are concerned, and I got to tell you, I am so happy that I never chose pitching as a business in terms of training, because I remember Tom House, and I went to a clinic of his with a group in 1998. And Tom House swore up and down, wrote a book, swore up and down that these are the absolutes. I guarantee it. This is it. 2 years later, he wrote a new book and said, the stuff that I said in that other book, no good. And I went, you lost me. I haven't modified. I've learned more. I've certainly learned more over time, but I haven't modified anything I've taught in the last 25 years because none of it really changed. But pitching is, I don't suffer from worrying about too many injuries with hitters. There are very few injury mechanisms, and they're really easy to pick out. Pitching, I have no clue. I can't tell you why I've thrown for 25 years, 200 plus pitches a day, every single day, and my arm is fine. I don't know why. I stick to what I know, and pitching is such a scary thing in terms of this is absolute. And Tom House is the most respected guy in the game and has been for a long time. And then suddenly he's like, I erased everything I said 2 years ago. Here's a new book. we don't run into that problem as hitters. We end up with new philosophies, with new theories of hitting, but there's nothing absolute about a theory. A theory is just that. I definitely want to thank you guys for showing up again. It's so much fun. And this particular discussion was one of those discussions I can't wait to get it done and through. So, Garrett, I can get to timing, because I can't wait to talk about timing, because it's the most misunderstood thing in hitting. And I want to keep really re-emphasizing, stop looking at other people. Look directly at the hitter in front of you and work with them and their strengths and weaknesses, because nobody, very few people are going to be Ted Williams with that kind of artistic kind of wrist and turn and all that stuff. Some of the absolutes of body rotation and things like that, you can look at those hitters, but avoid looking at the anomalous behaviors, the things that look unusual. Avoid looking at those and then assigning that to being the key to their elite status is, wow, look at that kicking out leg like we talked about last week. Look at that scissor kick. That's why he's the best hitter in baseball. It isn't. That's just, something he does, and he happens to be the best hitter in baseball. But those kind of things, there isn't one of those weird little, I found the gold in hitting, and here it is. To me, as we're wrapping this up, and this is all segue to the single gold that I absolutely has found, is timing. Timing. And so I want to go over ways to teach you guys how to teach hitters timing, which is hugely important. And we'll talk about all three aspects of timing: the intuitive, how long it takes to swing my bat, and my awareness of that. When do I get into positions so that I can swing? And then lastly, when do I make my decision as the ball's in the air? So we're going to talk all about that, drills that you'll be able to use to get hitters to understand different contact points that shoot the ball, working chalk to chalk. I will discuss my bias on, I do not believe in hitting gap to gap, because gap to gap is only 50% of a baseball field. And I believe in using 100% of the baseball field, or having the capacity or ability to do that. I may have a bias as to where I want to hit. I like to pull balls, because that's where I'm going to hit a ball the hardest. So that's what I'm shopping for early in the count. But I won't say my hitter's great, they're gap to gap. That girl who was at Stanford, she hit and she was a catcher. She's 5'11", probably weighed about $180, but not she was like a brick, $180. And other men were envious of her swing. She went to Stanford. This was back in 2000, I think, 1999 or 2000. She went to Stanford, and then she came back in the wintertime and she hit. And I was thinking, oh my God, what happened to her swing? And I didn't say it because I don't want to freak her out. And then I said, so what's going on with what you're doing right here? And she said, oh, well, they've got me hitting gap to gap. And so she totally modified her swing so that she could limit her swing to 50% of the field. And I was thinking, well, yeah, but what about the other 50? So that's something we'll also talk about when we discuss contact points next week. I want to thank you guys all for showing up. It's awesome. I will be posting this entire conversation on my YouTube channel, and I will post a link to that, so that if you want to go back and review any of the stuff that we've talked about, it's all going to be there. And I think we found a way to do this every week. So that last week I relied on Zoom and their recording method, which turned into a total disaster and dropped me 3 times. As you guys that were there will remember, my bandwidth got eaten up because of that recording. So I used a separate system on a different computer. So I've got 3 computers running in my house right now for this meeting right here. And so thank you all very, very, very much. And I will see you all next week, I hope, and can't wait to get to the timing.